This is Professor Barry Brennan. We are picking up part 3 of communication and the shaping of our identities. We have just finished talking about self-fulfilling prophecies, or the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy and how that affects our relationship with ourselves and others. And now we're going to get into it a little deeper and talk about the two types of self-fulfilling prophecies. There's the one, obviously, that you impose on yourself, that your expectations of yourself directly influence your behavior. So what you think about yourself does come true. And then the ones that are imposed on us by others. Oftentimes it's by a parent or some authority figure in our life that has imposed some belief on us, and that we end up behaving to match the belief they have about us. All right. This is going to be fun. So we're going to talk about identity management, and we're going to get into it in a pretty deep way. So communication is identity management. Oftentimes when we think about that, we think a lot about it in terms of we do identity management online, right? But we do it all the time, actually. We're always managing our identities in some way. So it's understood as communication strategies that people use. Remember, communication is not just verbal, it's nonverbal. So communication strategies that people use to influence how others view them. It also goes to this idea that we're always persuading, right? We're always trying to persuade in some way. So communication strategies that we use to get to influence people, how people view us. And identity management breaks us up into two different concepts or ideas. Is that we have this public self, the one that everyone sees, and then we have this private self. The private self is the self that only the most intimate people that are involved in our lives see, like your family members. Okay, when you walk, like think about your house. The house encompasses like where your private self lives. But the moment you walk out that door is your public self. Okay, it's a good way to like think of how those change. Your public self too, though, you could bring your public self. I bring my public self here when I'm online doing teaching. This is my public self, not my private self, but my public self, my professional self. Also known as the presenting self or the perceived self. I like the public and private. It's easier for me to understand. So that presenting self or our public self, that's our public image. What we show to the world, how and what we want others to see, also defined as our face, the face that we show to others, the self that we present for social approval. Okay? And that perceived self or your private self, that's a reflection of our self-concept. The person you realize yourself to be during honest self-reflection and self-appraisal. Parts of self you rarely reveal, sometimes if at all. Think about who you are when you're by yourself or with your significant other. Okay, who are you? And they know you in a way that probably no one knows you. And then, of course, you know yourself in a way that no one knows you. That's what that means. Interesting, right? Okay, characteristics of identity management. What do we mean by that? We construct multiple identities. We do that. Doesn't mean we have multiple personality disorder. We're not talking about personalities. We construct multiple identities, meaning multiple roles, different things that we play. I'm in teacher role. I have to take teacher hat when I'm in my relationship. Teacher hat doesn't really work in a relationship. It's better to just keep it in the classroom. My relationship hat doesn't work in the classroom. You know, there's different hats that we wear. The hat that I wear if I go out, I don't know, with my friends, right? Just being a friend, not being a teacher, being a good friend. There's different hats that we wear. Role of, my parents are gone now, but I used to wear a daughter hat. That was a certain identity that I had, a certain face that I showed to my parents. Did they know me? Yes, but I definitely showed the face that you show to your parents is not the same face that you show to your significant other or even to your siblings. Okay. We collaborate on how we manage those identities. So you actually end up collaborating with others, right? Culturally, we collaborate. There's expectations in a culture or socially of how we're expected to act. If we're a teacher, if we're a student, if we're a doctor, right? We collaborate on how we manage those identities and what we expect from them. So that collaboration can be deliberate, where we actually, know exactly what we want, or it's unconscious. I'm going to tell you one for me. I have this unconscious thing that I do all the time. When I talk about a doctor, I immediately think it's a he. Now, it's ironic because I'm a pretty staunch feminist and I'm pretty much into equal rights for everyone. So the fact that I do that is so defined by the culture in the society, in the community that I grew up in. And it's interesting. So you can have values about something and still have certain habits that are unconscious. Okay, how do we manage these identities? Well, we manage them to start and manage relationships, right? Think about when you start the relationship and the identity that you present. We always present our best self in the beginning, and then they get to know us, and that's when they either stick around or don't stick around, right? We manage our identities to gain compliance from others, meaning to gain their agreement, to get them to go along with what we want. We do it to save others' face. That goes into culture and tradition in our families, right? How we behave when we're with our families, how we behave when we're with our families in a public setting, how we behave appropriately. What happens when, like, I'll give you an example. I went to a wedding, and my partner's ex-partner was there with someone else, and that person was actually the mother of the bride. She was jealous of their previous relationship, and she went off at the rehearsal dinner when it was her daughter's wedding. Okay? That's an example of not following the rules. Those are things you don't do, right? You keep that to yourself. You hold that back. She was not trying to help her daughter save face. But she wasn't doing a good job of managing her identity as mother of the bride, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. We manage our identities to explore new selves, to see what does it feel like to be, let's say if you're having your own sexual identity crisis, or it doesn't even have to go to that extreme, but you're just thinking, you know what? I think I want to dress like a little more boyish if I'm a girl, or if I'm a guy, I think I want to try out makeup, or I want to see what does it feel like. I'm going to start doing yoga. Okay, those are identities, and you develop this identity as a person who does yoga, or a person that I don't know, maybe you're a person that goes to those clubs and sings karaoke, right? Maybe that's part of your identity. We do it to explore. Here's a great clip from the movie Easy A. Really talks about how we manage identities. Check that out on your own time. Okay, we're going to look at Irving Goffman's, and this is where we're going to finish with this particular episode of this lecture. So Irving Goffman, he's the father of this impression management theory, and kind of where identity management comes out of. So it's premised on the theory that people act knowingly or unknowingly in a manner that they perceive will be beneficial to them, right? That goes back to that identity management. So we act in a way that's going to help us out. Think about that. I think we all do that, right? We act in a way that's going to help us out. I mean, have you ever been in a professional situation in which you knew you didn't like someone, but you acted professionally and you did what you needed to do because there was an end goal in mind? So you had to just not even give in to not wanting to be around them or anything like that, because the end goal was more important, because you needed to get something. It was going to be beneficial for you. Okay. Individuals tend to accentuate or suppress, so they tend to emphasize or diminish certain characteristics of the self depending on the context. So if you're a really loud person, you might bring that a couple notches down in a situation that requires you to be quiet, right? Or in a social situation that isn't the type of social situation that you're used to, but it's required you to act a different way. And Irving Goffman also said, when certain people are present, an individual will present specific aspects of their self that complement that other person. Okay? Think about that. Do you do that? I think we all do that. And then finally, we monitor ourselves to gain approval from others. So we want to be accepted. That's what Irving Goffman is saying, is we manage ourselves. We manage to try to make a good impression, whatever, depending on who we're with, in order to feel accepted, in order to be part of. That's going back to that idea of that status quo. We want that equilibrium. We're seeking that balance. That's a normal human goal to have. So we're going to break this down a little bit. So he broke it down into what we call front stage and backstage. And I want you to think of the front stage as the public self and the backstage as the private self. So the public self, what you want people to see and what people see. That's how he talks about it, okay? And the setting, that context, shapes what people see, which is influenced by the norms and culture that we live in, the setting, the context, the environment. And in addition to that, what we wear, what's our style, what our haircut, our mannerism, that influences our public self. So let's just say if I were to do my videos from a bathroom, right? You'd be like, what is wrong with her? That context would make you probably not even want to listen to me and wonder, like, what's happening in the bathroom? Why are you doing that? Why is isn't she in a regular room? Right? The context, all that shapes what kind of self that you're presenting. Or maybe I did my video in a bedroom, right? So, okay. Private self, the part of ourself that we monitor and regulate, okay, that we try to have control over. We decide to disclose this part, right? We decide that. We decide to tell our partner how we really feel about something, or we love them, or we need to be them, or we're feeling needy, or we need a shoulder to cry on. That's your private self, right? And it's also, this is culture bound. We live in a culture where the expressions of certain emotions is not acceptable in public. That's our culture. So if we lived in a culture that wasn't, we might have a different experience of a private self. I want you to really think this through. Okay? The part of ourself is not bound to cultural and social approval. So that's the part of ourself that we are real, right? The real part of ourselves. The part of ourselves that actually, when you have a good partnership, that's the part that they fall in love with, that real part. Okay, we're going to stop here. This is part 3. I'll see you in part 4. Hang in there. See you later.